We will look at whether Prime Minister Modi's tough talking with Donald Trump is a diplomatic victory for India. Welcome to the UAE edition of On Point. As the UAE edition of the News9 Global Summit begins on June 19th, we bring you a special show about what's occupying the top of the mind in the world of geopolitics. Thousands of people are fleeing Tehran as Iran and Israel launched new missile strikes at each other despite Donald Trump calling for Tehran's unconditional surrender. No surrender has taken place. So the big question is, will Iran surrender? Will US launch military strikes in Tehran or Fordo, strike nuclear bases, use bunker busting bombs which can penetrate 60 meters of rocks? Now what has Trump done? Donald Trump has warned on social media on Tuesday that US patience was wearing thin. He said that there was no intention to kill Iran's senior leader, Ayatollah al-Khamenei, for now, and quote unquote, this is very important. He claimed that the United States knew where Iran's supreme leader was hiding. And minute later, Donald Trump posted unconditional surrender. In a tit-for-tat statement, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah al-Khamenei in a series of posts warned terrorist Zionist regime quote unquote and said that the battle begins. Moments later, Khamenei posted on X, "We must give a strong response to the terrorist Zionist regime. We will show the Zionists no mercy." The statement came shortly after Iran launched 2 rounds of ballistic missiles at Israel on Wednesday. As Khamenei's posture indicates, Iran is unlikely to capitulate meekly. Iran's ballistic missiles are an important deterrent against the United States, Israel, and other potential regional targets because they have them in thousands. Iranian army commander-in-chief has warned residents of Israel, especially Tel Aviv and Haifa, to leave these areas for their safety. It is in Dubai we are tracking the development, and it is in Dubai the News9 is hosting its summit on 19 June. And it is happening in midst of the biggest crisis which probably West Asia has seen after the 6-day war between Israel, Egypt and other countries. Now before I move forward in the story, let me play out the bite of the Iranian commander-in-chief.
عملیاتی که تاکنون اجرا شده صرفاً هشدار برای بازدارندگی بوده است و عملیات تنبیهی به زودی اجرا خواهد شد. به جد به ساکنین سرزمین‌های اشغالی به ویژه تل‌آویو و حیفا هشدار داده می شود برای حفظ جان خود این مناطق رو ترک کنند.
Gidon Shah alleged the Iranian regime is targeting civilians and spelled out the IDF's 3-fold objectives. Derail Iran's nuke program, that's number 1. Severely damage Iran's ballistic missiles and scuttle the plan to eliminate the state of Israel. And now let me play out the bite of the Israel's Foreign Affairs Minister.
You can see here the results of the Iranian war crimes. The Iranian regime is targeting civilians. They are targeting only civilians. You cannot find even one soldier which is dead after their attacks. Only civilians, because they are targeting civilians, they are targeting population centers, while we are targeting the nuclear program, the missiles program. We have very clear goals. First of all, to severely damage the nuclear program. We hadn't finished with that. We still have objectives. We still have targets that now we can target easily because our Air Force now can relatively fly freely there, and we still have objectives. Secondly, to severely damage the ballistic missiles program of the Iranian regime, and thirdly, to severely damage their plan to eliminate the state of Israel.
Is it endgame for Khamenei? Because in a recent interview, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that killing Khamenei could bring an end to the long-standing hostility between Israel and Iran. Soon after that, Israel's Katz warned Iran's supreme leader could meet a fate similar to that of Saddam Hussein. Now, there are a couple of things I'll put on table. One, Khamenei's influence has waned since Israel pounded Iran's proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah and Houthis. His military advisors have been killed in Israeli strikes. In fact, New York Times went on to write that inner circle of Khamenei has been hollowed out by the Israeli strikes. Which means he doesn't have senior advisors anymore. So the big question here is, will the United States of America fight Israel's war against Iran? That's the question number one. Is Israel pulling Trump into the war? Will Iran close the Strait of Hormuz? Who will the Sunni nation side with? And most important of all, ultimately, will Iran surrender? And on this issue, let me introduce my guests. I'm joined by Aditya Rajkal, Senior Executive Editor, Strategic Affairs. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Itai Melchior, Non-Resident Senior Fellow, N7 Initiative, the Atlantic Council, live from Haifa. Itai, thank you so much. I know it's not safe being there. And subsequently, I'll be joined by Ehsan Safarnejad, Iranian geopolitical analyst from Iran, and Jeff Bellabon, Senior Counsel, International and Government Affairs, American Center for Law and Justice. He's live from Jerusalem, a place that has seen intense missile strikes. So first to you, Aditya, before I reach out to my guests in Jerusalem, Tehran and Haifa. Do you think that the Khamenei is going to surrender?
Well, you asked me a pointed question, and we are sitting here in Dubai, not very far from where the epicenter of this entire conflict is. But a very straightforward answer to your question, no. Khamenei is not going to surrender. He's not built that way. He's not wired that way that he will surrender. Iran, one has to face, is a radicalized society today. And if we go by the figure of people who attended Nasrallah's funeral, or before that Qasem Soleimani's funeral, you would believe that there are millions who still believe in the idea of the Ayatollah. So as of now, it doesn't seem like, but the entire context is such that the US may or may not want, but has been dragged into this entire conflict. There is a kind of a debate within the national security apparatus of Washington DC. And this debate is, there are Trump supporters who believe that the idea of going to war is very much correct and should have happened yesterday. But there are others who believe that this would be detrimental to the US strategic interests, and this would perhaps be a national security risk and a headache that will continue for years together. Now currently, there is, of course, for last almost 7 to 10 days, this kind of a conflict that's underway. And now there's a new statement that has come in from the Israeli defense minister. You saw Ayatollah speaking and addressing earlier in the day, giving a threat directly to the Washington DC that if you enter the war, there will be detrimental consequences for you. Your bases in the Middle East are not safe anymore. Now, Israel Katz, who is the Israeli defense minister, has said, and I quote, "The tornado storm continues to strike Tehran. Air Force jets have just destroyed the headquarters of the Iranian regime's internal security, the central arm of the Iranian dictator's repression. As we promised, we will continue to target symbols of the regime and strike Ayatollah's rule wherever it may be." Benjamin Netanyahu is also very much clear. One may say that internally, Netanyahu wants to stick to power. So he will want this war to continue both against the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and now directly with Iran. Because this is perhaps the easiest formula to remain in power domestically. That apart, I think when we speak about the security architecture of Israel, it is very much important for them. Just like we in India see Pakistan as a direct threat of Pakistan-sponsored terror, Israel globally sees Iran as the epicenter of terrorism that wants to not just wipe out Israel,
Okay.
but completely annihilate the Jews.
Okay, Itai, the big question here is, it's easy to start a war. You can plan a war. But a lot of military analysts say it's very difficult to end it. Even Russians have not been able to end the war in Ukraine. So what's the big picture from the Israeli perspective, Itai?
So first, I just have to agree that Iran will not surrender. The word surrender should be off the table. Whoever is using the word surrender does not understand the Iranian people and ideology. Of course, in the end, there will be an agreement, and every side will have to live with something. But to call it surrender is something that is a non-starter. That's important to mention. Another issue that was hardly mentioned until now and has to be brought to focus because it is also critical to the outcome is how the Iranian people will behave, because in the end it is a repressive regime. And if you see some of the Israeli targets in the last 48 hours, the national TV, security apparatus, etc., I think it's also a signal to the people saying maybe the people who have planned to overthrow their regime, now is the time. Because I think a regime change is something that everybody in the region would like to see, the Sunni countries, Israel, the US, and the rest of the West, and therefore I think that this is something that is a desired outcome, but beside hinting and weakening the regime itself, there's not much that can be done. That is really up to the Iranian people. So that is important to mention. Another thing important to mention is that even though we are a war zone, there are currently more than 100,000 Israelis stuck overseas, and you should see the fight that they are giving to come back home. People are on every flight that is opened to, they call it rescue flights, and you're rescuing people from safe Europe and safe Asia to Israel. There are people fighting to get onto those flights and come back home, feeling that this is the place they have to be. So yes, Haifa, where I live, and a few hours ago, I was just in the area that was hit a couple of days ago in Haifa, and it didn't look pretty. And it's not fun to run every few hours to the bomb shelters at middle of the night, middle of the day, whenever. But I think that Israel is very determined, as are the Israeli people who are backing the government. There's a 90+% unison around this issue.
But you know, Itai, there is another aspect of this larger West Asian conflict. Israel has been saying that it's a matter of existence. It's an existential crisis for Israel, that if Iran has a bomb, then Iran will definitely use it against Israel. I pose this question differently. What will convince Israel that Iran is in no position either to manufacture a bomb or in position to go for its manufacturing in next 10, 15 or 20 years, in position to create assets so that it can enrich uranium? What will make Israel be convinced of that fact, which can lead to cessation of hostility?
So Katiki, it's a great question, and I don't want to get too technical on how to make an atomic bomb. You can go online and learn how to do it. One substance, though, you need is, of course, to have enough enriched uranium. This we know for a fact that they're very close to having. The other thing you need is rockets to deliver them, missiles, and that is one of the things that Israel is targeting, is also Iran's intercontinental ballistic missile program. And you need to weaponize, to connect the bomb to make it into a bomb. It's like having, let's say, gunpowder. Doesn't mean that you have a bullet. Okay, you need to weaponize it. And Israel felt Iran was very close to, and therefore this is the time. Now, Israel has already set back the Iranian program very far back. There are different opinions on this. We've heard the head of the IEA and other entities come and say how set back they have. But the fact is, we've set back the program, all of them, both the missile program and the nuclear program, far back. Of course, to complete this, we have to attack a few sites, all of them known to everybody. And this is going to be very difficult. Israel has claimed that it will be able to do this, but of course we need what is called the bunker busters, which the Americans have. And of course, if the Americans do decide to join, it's going to be a game changer, and we will very quickly see a change in the rhetoric also from Iran. So for now, Israel has probably created a lot of damage, and therefore in the end, you want to see one of two agreements. One could be just a normal, let's call it ceasefire, in which Israel stops attacking Iran and Iran stops shooting at Israel. A more comprehensive plan will be, and that is maybe what people call surrender, will have to do with what Iran is allowed to do nuclear-wise. Israel may be confident enough, having taken out the sites, not to go too much into detail here. 10 years is a lot of time in the Middle East.
You know, Itai made a very important point. But there's another aspect to this West Asian conflict, and that is that there is a clear divide between the Sunni and the Shia world, and that division is pretty much clear. So, is it correct for me to say, in context of international politics, that Iran today stands isolated? Or can we say that Iran is now firmly ensconced with the Russians and the Chinese now? This is the axis: China, Iran, Russia.
See, both your analysis are absolutely true, Kartike. One, Iran is completely isolated to a great extent, but it cannot also blindly rely completely on Russia or even China at this particular stage. Yes, when it comes to defense equipment, when it comes to missiles, when it comes to air power, etc., there's a lot of support coming in from Russia and China particularly. But, I would draw you back to the initial phase of this conflict. The first few statements came in from Saudi Arabia and UAE. They condemned this attack. But when the first barrage and volley of missiles went from Iran to Israel, which were the countries that stopped those missiles from entering Israel? It was Saudi Arabia and UAE and other countries in the Middle East, including Azerbaijan. So where is the Sunni world? Where is the unification of the Muslim world when it comes to Iran? And you also talk about Pakistan.
I think Asim Munir should be listening to this.
Asim Munir, I was coming to that. Asim Munir, interesting, has a lunch meeting in a few hours from now, 10:30 p.m. India time, with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is rewarding him for the ceasefire that he agreed to. But the real story here is that in January 2024, there was a missile crisis happening between Iran and Pakistan. They were firing missiles against each other. But now, a National Security Council member of the Iranians comes and says that Pakistanis have assured us that if Israel uses nuclear weapons against Iran, then Pakistan will fire a nuclear weapon at Israel. Can it happen? Can it really practically happen?
No, it cannot.
It cannot happen.
No, it
and
cannot
Pakistan has immediately gone back on it completely. So the reality of the matter is that Pakistan may try to monkey balance in this Muslim world that, we are supporting Iran, they are our brothers. But the reality is it is not going to. Everybody today, including the UAE, including Saudi, looks at national interest first, looks at trade power first, looks at economic interest first, and does not want to get entangled into the conflict. Last point, Kartike. Where is the Muslim world, where is the entire Middle East when it comes to supporting practically Iran on ground?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. Just as the way they did not accept the refugees who came in from Gaza and said that, we will face radicalization, we will face terrorism, we don't want them, you keep them somewhere else. And now with the Iran crisis similarly, they do not want to get entangled in a conflict directly here. But if there is a creation of a new Middle East, they will be the first ones to support it.
Now, let us get this conversation on the military issues. I am also joined by Jeff Balabon, Senior Counsel, International Government Affairs, American Center for Law and Justice. He's live from Jerusalem. Thank you, Jeff, for joining me. There's also a limit of war. There's a potential which a war has. There's a limit which a war has. There are missiles which Iran has. I don't think it can fire more than 2,000 missiles because it doesn't have more than 2,000 missiles. And there will be a limit of defense of the Iron Dome or the David Sling system, because there will be number of interceptors which Israel will have, and then it's going to run out. Are we going to? Can we look at this war from the perspective where both the parties think that now it's time we take a pause, because there is complete absence of conversation, where Israel has said no nuclear bombs, and Iran says, well, we are going to respond. So there is no middle ground right now. There is no middle line. There is no meeting line, if I may put it like this. Jeff.
That's correct. There is, and as far as I can see, I agree with you. There's no middle ground. This has always been an existential war. The timing of this, obviously, this is not the beginning of the war. This has been a war that's been going on for many decades. The most recent, I think, event started October 7th, where Iranian proxies. This recent escalation has to do with a new situation in America, as well as the approach of Iran to, be able to weaponize nuclear in a nuclear way. Israel felt it had no choice. Trump gave Iran a deadline, and now Israel's acting, and now Iran's trying to respond. And remember, this is not actually the people of Iran. It's a regime that is very fragile, but very powerful. And those two things are the same, which means it maintains power through force, but it is not loved by its people in China. But right now, there's a tremendous danger point, obviously, because their supreme leader really has very little options left to survive. And he clearly has not cared whatsoever about his own people. So very much there's brinksmanship happening here. But I happen to agree that this is one or the other. I also disagree with the idea that America is being called to wage Israel's war. Israel has been waging America's war. This Iranian regime has promised to obliterate America, destroy America. And let me make it very clear, that is not just talk. Delivering a nuclear EMP device to continental America, which is what you need an ICBM for example, would literally destroy the United States of America. So this is America's war that Israel's been fighting. And now America is joining in.
So, there is a larger issue also here that, are we asking the right questions? And then I'll go to Aditya again. Most of the wars in the world, the proxy wars, Jeff, have become real wars. The proxy war between Iran and Israel has become a real war. The proxy war which the Pakistan was conducting against India turned into a real war. So how do you look at this global trend where the proxy wars are turning into real wars, and conventional methods, conventional weaponry is being deployed in both civilian and military areas?
Well, when I talk about proxy wars, I don't mean wars not being real wars. I mean wars being waged by bigger powers using proxy forces. So Iran is using proxy forces, obviously, against Israel, let's say Hamas or Hezbollah. But, China and Russia are relying on Iran, not in an open war sense, but in a geopolitical strategic power sense, to also move against America's interests. And America sees that as well. And China has to be reconsidering its own positions, because Israel has so comprehensively shown dominance, until now at least, of Iran, that hopefully China is rejiggering its own thoughts, because it's not as though China doesn't have its own relations with Israel. It's not always hostile. This is more of its own global view. But yes, those big wars do turn into local actual wars with terrible consequences.
Absolutely. And Itai, I should have asked this to both of you, Jeff and Itai, to both of you. Itai, first to you. Are you guys safe? How intense has been the Iranian barrage in Haifa? We had learned that Haifa was one of the prime targets of the Iranian attack. Are you safe there?
Yes, thank God. It's not easy days. As I said earlier on, a few hours ago, I was at one of the sites that were hit. But I can tell you that when Hezbollah was shooting at Haifa, heavy barrages for several weeks, we felt our whole shelter start shaking and shuddering when there was a direct hit not very far from where I live. So it's a bit surrealistic that you live in the modern world, that you're speaking intercontinentally, and then you suddenly have to say, sorry, but I have to run to the shelter, and it doesn't feel like realistic. Also, as I said, the site I was at earlier today, not fun site. You can see it. By the way, the pictures you were showing before of a beautiful house in a place called Tamra. It's an Arab village 4 of the 24 killed in Israel so far are Arab citizens of Israel, who a mother and 2 daughters and 1 more family member who were killed. The father is a senior, well-known lawyer in Israel who lost his family in one crazy rocket barrage aimed at civilians from Iran. And yes, we feel safe. We have good defense systems. Israel has invested heavily in defense systems. I think the entire world wants to see and learn how this is working. Still, when there are heavy attacks, they cannot always be fully intercepted. That's why we've seen a few direct hits. That's why there have been 24 civilian casualties. And that's why, yes, it's not easy. It's not fun. You know, I think about my parents. My father is 87 years old. 2-3 times a night, he has to run 3 floors to the shelter. It's not normal.
Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Jeff, are you safe there in Jerusalem?
Well, listen, safe. I mean, there are rocket barrages here. We get warnings sometimes 2 or 3 times a night, but it has not been as sustained as Haifa and Tel Aviv, nor has it been damaged like there's been. But the rockets are coming our way. We get warnings, and as Itai says, it's primarily exhausting. There's no day and no night because you never know. And we did have until yesterday, 30 minutes of warning thanks to Israeli technology and the way the launches were happening from Iran. We were updated just yesterday, and everyone is updated on their cell phones through multiple ways. That now there will only give you 10 minutes notice. You have 10 minutes to get to where a shelter will be, and then the sirens are likely to start. And it's exhausting, but I think that you can't spend your time being afraid. I think people don't. It's become normalized in a certain bizarre way.
Jeff, is it correct to say that it's very difficult to do a regime change in Iran? There are a lot of experts who say that the Islamic revolution is firmly entrenched in the society. Israel can achieve its strategic objectives, military objectives, by destroying nuclear installations. But the larger political objective is difficult because the sort of control which the mullahs have in Iran through IRGC in Basij is 100%. Is it correct?
I apologize. I'm not sure if the audio is coming through to you, but I missed a lot of your question. I heard you ask about Israel's ability to achieve its objectives, but I'm not sure what the balance of the question was. I think that Israel has made it very clear it has 2 objectives, and actually rationally it has 2 objectives. One is ending the regime, right? That regime, again, Israel can lead that horse to water, but the Iranian people have to want it to end and have to feel brave enough and strong enough to end that regime. The other is ending this drive for nuclear weapons, which is necessary not just for Israel's survival, but for the entire stability of the world. Are you asking me to hold again? I'm not hearing audio.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Jeff. Aditya, the question is 2-pronged. There is no doubt that Israel can achieve its military objective. They have the political wherewithal, very efficient intelligence military service, and they have the capacity to move Donald Trump and the American state because they have got powerful lobby there. But is it possible to do a regime change? Because a lot of experts say that the Islamic revolution is firmly entrenched in the society. It has made the society even more conservative. So, it's difficult to throw the yoke of the mullahs or the clergy there because they also have the tools of so-called repression, control, or organized control over the society through IRGC or the Basij, which is an internal paramilitary force, because people outside would know it's only IRGC, but there's another component of control which is called Basij.
Well, Karthikeya, the problem here is that when we study Afghanistan, in Afghanistan there have been various clans, there is Jirga, there was of course Taliban, absolutely, which was silently out there, and there was somebody out there fighting to take control. In Iran, on the other hand, there are elements who have been fighting, no doubt, but they've been fighting outside the territory. For instance, the Crown Prince. who is outside, who is not there, who perhaps does not have the kind of public support.
And he's been tweeting, you know.
He's been tweeting.
He's been tweeting.
And perhaps he's been pushed also. He's receiving support from the Western countries. But the problem here is that if not the Ayatollah, if not Khamenei, then who else will take control if there is a possibility of a national movement really building out there? The question right now is also that the US would be thinking that to what extent can we go, because it cannot be that the US supports Israel for a week and then goes back to the situation. Also, there are hot and cold statements that are coming in from the US. I have no doubts in my mind that Donald Trump was very much aware of Israel's attack on Iran from the very first day and had supported it. But remember what happened 2 days ago.
Silent support.
Silent support. 2 days ago, Donald Trump came and said that we have nothing to do with the Israeli attacks that are happening in Iran. Now, what did he say 24 hours ago? He said, US has complete control over the Iranian skies. So is he trying to bluff people? Does he think that people are fools? Or is he trying to, change his goalposts and change his policy time and again? Because there is repeated claims now being made that the, midway exit from the G7 summit was for a policy change to happen. I firmly know that the US ambassador to Israel has convinced Donald Trump that this is the time, you have been sent by God to do this duty and you should make this happen. But there are other elements who I cannot take names of. There are perhaps people from the Indian origin also who are not very much keen and perhaps are apprehensive that should US really put soldiers on ground, put their assets down on ground, because as you would know, there's already a lot of robust deployment.
They don't want to create another Iraq, they don't want to create another Afghanistan, and they can't afford a Vietnam.
Absolutely. So the reality is that at certain point of time, the US would want that there is an off-ramp that is given to Iran.
No, you made a very important point. Aditya has made a very important point, and I'll take this point both to Itai and Jeff. Aditya has made one very important point. Itai, Aditya says that there is a difference between Afghanistan or, for example, even, when de-Baathification took place of Iraq. The point is, if you take out Khamenei or if you take out the top IRGC, who then takes control of the levers in Iran? Is that a possibility? Are there those people there in Iran, Itai? Suppose there is no Khamenei. Who takes over?
That is a very big question, and that is why it's very difficult when you start playing God and changing regimes. You never know where it ends, and I think that is why there are people both in the US administration and also in Israel saying, yes, we don't want this, but we don't even know what will come instead. And sometimes you say, rather the devil you know. Now, the US has many reasons to join in with Israel. As Jeff alluded to some of them, this is not only Israel's war, it's also the US's war. But it's very simple that when you see someone is winning, you want to join. There's a saying in Israel that failure is an orphan, but success has many fathers. And of course, when Trump is seeing now that Israel is really winning and it's clear where this is heading, he may want to join just for the sake of being part of the success and getting credit for it, because just sitting on the fence and saying we are not part of it doesn't give you credit in the day after. There are a lot of powers internally in Iran who want to take over, and I think in the end it will have to be an internal issue. Nobody from the outside will determine for the Iranian people who is going to take over. And if you look at what's happening in Syria, which is fascinating and deserves a show on its own, and I wrote a piece about it recently, in what is happening in Syria, where a former terrorist is now heading a government which seems to be on the right side of history and humanity. And the same could happen in Iran. If you look at the panic of the Iranian regime, the reason they are saying that they are dominating the skies of Israel is not for external reasons. It's for their own people. And they claim to be stopping all the vans because they are looking for Mossad agents and Israeli drones. But that's not the real reason. The reason they're doing that is because they're looking for internal elements who are going to try and use this. And therefore, the main panic there is internal. And in the end, this could actually be one of the things that pushes Khamenei toward some kind of deal, is to hold on to his regime, not from outside threats, but from inside threats.
Let me, I'd like to address something that was raised before in the program.
Jeff, if you look, Jeff,
I want to address something you said before. It's very important. It is impossible to understand the situation in America if someone believes that there's a lobby that's persuasive here, that there's some influential lobby that is literally zero, but I mean zero. I've spent my life in this. This is an interesting narrative from people who try to look away from reality. There is no powerful lobby that's getting America to do this. There is an American sensibility shared by the vast majority, supermajority of Trump's voters, that protecting the state of Israel is important to America for all kinds of reasons, philosophical, as well as religious, as well as tactical and strategic reasons. That is one of the most important votes in America, and it is tens of millions of Americans. There is no lobby that speaks for them, and there's no lobby lobbying. That is just what Americans believe. That's number one, okay? To not understand that is to not understand what motivates Donald Trump and America. Number two, Ambassador Huckabee is a wonderful man. He did not persuade Donald Trump that God sent him. Donald Trump believes that God saved him to do great things, and he also has made very clear that he sees a unity between Israel's and America's civilizational battle. However, I agree with Itai that a lot of the rhetoric and the way it's being portrayed now has to do with the evident dominance of Israel over Tehran in the first days of this war, and as well as a growing narrative that's behind that.
You know, Jeff, very quickly, then I'll close my discussion, this topic. You know, if you look at the debathification in the Iraq example, what happened was that, you know, America ended up unleashing something even more vicious, even more evil in form of ISIS. When the states are dismantled, or even the authoritarian, corrupt, or fundamentalist regimes are dismantled, sometimes even more harsher version comes out from the civil society. Is that a possibility in Iran, that you know, when the structure gets dismantled, something even more harsher comes out of it?
I understand the question. And people make the comparison. I think it's not a good comparison. This is not destabilizing a regime. The goal is to restore a regime that was destabilized. That's the first. And now we don't know if that's going to happen. The odds of it being worse than the imminence of this regime's nuclear abilities are next to zero. I'm not saying the people who come afterwards will be great. They will almost undoubtedly be better. It will be, 1,000 to 1 chance that they will be better. Now, what will they be? I don't know yet. But if you take the temperature of the Iranian people, as we have for decades, by and large, most of them want to be friends with the West and Israel. So we'll see how this results. But the odds, now Iraq was very different. There we toppled the regime. That I think was a mistake. Even at the time, I was very close to the Bush administration. When I was talking to them in the White House, they promised the ultimate goal was Iran. They thought this was the first step. I think that was a mistake. And it ended because it went in the wrong direction. Iran has been the problem all along. And Iran, this regime must be toppled and changed. What comes next will almost inevitably be better.
Jeff, I'm really sorry. I'm cutting you short because, I've really run short of time. Jeff, I'm really sorry. I've really run short of time. I wish we could have devoted an entire 1 hour on this discussion, entire 1 hour. Itai, thank you so much for joining me from Haifa. Jeff, thank you for joining me from Jerusalem. Aditya Rajkal continues to be with me from Dubai because there's another story which we have to discuss. And that story is the resolute nature of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And it's the story of Prime Minister's tough talk with the US President, Donald Trump. मध्यस्थता कश्मीर पे नहीं की है, नहीं होगी और नहीं की गई है. This is the second on point, but after a short break.
$2.5 lakh strong legacy and counting. Join the big league with the XUV 700 with celebratory offers up to rupees 75,000.
Friendships aren't forged overnight. In 2015, India